Here you go. Now I can like this over
My
here.
Power went out this morning, so. Luckily, yeah. Well, I didn't.
I just
check
received
it.
an invite to
Something
join.
happened.
Oh,
It just popped up on my screen,
oh,
It looked
okay.
like 100 households, so
probably because it's in my
I
camera.
couldn't get in the
Yeah.
garage.
And I joined just.
Well, or
Unhooked,
team.
yeah.
I've been, too many people I work with
But-
this team, so I had to install team.
Oh. Yeah, that's.
It's all good.
Deal.
I can't reach. I have to
Meeting was-
Yeah.
maybe sit down to reach it, pull it down.
Mine was reachable, so it wasn't too hard
Just
to
forget
figure out,
it.
Yeah.
but it wasn't, yeah,
Guys
normally.
with the highest insurance in the country. And you can also put it into the jury pool to show up for jury duty now that you're a registered.
Hopefully
Michigan
it's back on.
resident. I'll live on. Is there anyone sitting there? I don't know. You're back in Michigan. Say, we're gonna get you too, correct? You have to be in that jury pool. Anyways, yeah, well, welcome back to.
You say too much coffee. For sure.
Some breaks in it. By the way, we're done with the heat wave for now. Average highs in Grand Rapids the last 4 days, almost 94 degrees. That's the warmest 4-day stretch in GR.
Yeah. I didn't get that up there.
Yeah.
I am not in Heather with the Allegheny County.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'd give up my seat, because I'm not really, you'd like to sit or talk.
So I think you're good to go whenever you're ready.
All right, even though we're still waiting for coffee to arrive, it's coming.
Yes.
Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, call the meeting to order. I know I didn't sign the sheet, so I wanna pass that around and walk, cause I got here early and then I had to go to another office and then.
Yeah, I can have to print the
Oh,
agenda
thanks, you didn't have to bring it all the way over here. but-
Yeah.
and everything else, but these.
Okay, yeah. Did everybody else sign? And then there should be, there's a public one too, right, for non-committee members, so make sure, please, that you sign in.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They can't. Stuff.
Spencer, probably. Yeah,
Yeah, that looks like.
Spencer, who is making the coffee.
Yes.
Yes,
Save that seat.
Yeah.
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 Give him a
Yeah.
pass.
Don't take his stuff.
Yeah.
All right, there's a lot of people in the room and a few people online. Do we want to just do a quick round of introductions? Just for reminder for some people and maybe introductions for other people. Okay, so I'm Kelly Goward. I work with the ODC network and represent an environmental interest group and serve as the chairperson of the committee.
I'm Russ Boersma with Hero Waste, representing a hauler on the committee.
Matt Rosser of WM representing landfills. Paul Sachs, Ottawa County representing regional planning.
Dan Borsman, Sustainability Manager, representing City of Holland. Roarsmont, not Borsman.
And guilty of that.
Dan Tiedema, Organicycle with representing compost.
Joe Moss, County Commissioner.
Ron Francis, Deputy Administrator.
Doug Van Essen, Ottawa County Legal Services.
Carrie Bliss, Padma Sustainability and representing business, I believe, on this one. Either business or process, or I can't.
Waste diversion facility.
Okay, with diversion facility.
And Nick Carlson, I'm the Director of Business Development for Goodwill Industries of West Michigan. And I don't remember what I'm on here either.
So you must be.
It's a
General,
Goodwill.
yeah. Manage a material.
Yeah.
You manage a material.
Material.
I'm Kim Walters and I am the DPA and my job here is to assist essentially the materials management planning committee.
Yeah, and then if we wanna, we got other staff in the room too.
Our staff.
Alternate sustainability.
She is our secretary.
Yeah.
Heather Busick, Allegheny County Resource Recovery, and I'm also their DPA.
Tom, we were just doing quick introduction, so you came in right at the perfect time.
Perfect.
Yeah, to introduce yourself.
Tom Mahoney, Republic Services.
And then Kimmy, if you want to call the people that are online, yeah, quite see.
All right, I gotta switch. All right, so we have if, Pat, if you wanna unmute yourself, if you can hear us.
Did you say Matt?
Yeah, I said Matt.
Oh, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if you said Matt or not. Oh, maybe not. I'm Matt McPherson. I'm the communications manager for Kent County Public Works. So we're working on our own MMP, and yeah, I'm just sitting in on these.
Perfect. And Jeff with Eagle.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kirchmerrick. I'm the recycling specialist overseeing the Kent County infrastructure grants, Ottawa County infrastructure grants, and the City of Holland's infrastructure grants.
And Christina from Eagle. You're on mute. You're on mute, Christina.
Sorry about that. My computer had to reboot, so I'm doing this with my phone. So anyways, Christina Miller, I'm the materials management planning specialist in your area. Thank you.
And then Kath, I don't know if you can hear. I don't think so. Kath, can you hear or no? Nope, so we'll just skip. So, all right, we'll go from there.
All right, thanks, everybody. So then our first item on the agenda, I think it reads incorrectly. It's to approve the minutes from the April 23 meeting, not the March 26 meeting.
Well, that's
I have a motion, is there support? Any comments? There are some typos. So, I mean, I can email them, but like in 2B, members is spelled incorrect.
Didn't even notice it.
Well, there's red squiggly lines on my screen. So, in 6A, collaborative is spelled incorrect.
Did notice that.
And then also collaboration under, it's like a 6A 3. Collaboration is spelled wrong, and then under 7, assistance is spelled wrong. So that was what I just noticed. There's a few spelling errors. So any other comments on the minutes from the April meeting?
Thought it looked good.
So all in favor of approving with some spelling corrections signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. We're approved. Then we are up to public comment. Any public comment today? Anybody online? See people unmuting. What do you mean, Jeff?
Nope, no
Jeff?
comment.
Okay, thanks. All right, there will be an opportunity before the end of the meeting, again, for public comment. Then our next item is to approve the agenda.
A question about that. So the action item, the draft ordinance and the summary document, just wondering just about this action item, instead of it being a discussion item. Can we maybe talk about that on the agenda, how this is an action item and what action you're looking for this board, instead of it just being a discussion item?
So, it was asked to be, voted on as an action item. I believe, and I am not an expert on, how it can go, but I believe it can be an action item and still be a discussion item.
It doesn't have to be an action item. It's really just here for discussion.
Okay,
In the solid waste ordinance, it's something the Board of Commissioners would do. I'm sure the Board of Commissioners would love to have your input, yay or nay, in recommending the ordinance, but it's not necessary. It's not a component of the process, and Kelly explained it quite well. So the ordinance is provided for discussion and input. If this board or committee wants to provide that input, but it's a Board of Commissioners action. Yeah.
yeah,
So, I leave it to you as to whether maybe you want to let the discussion happen first to see whether there's a consensus in this committee or not, and whether you want to make a recommendation or not to the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah.
Those are things that maybe your discussion will illuminate.
yeah. And it's something that, from my understanding, they don't know yet if it's good, I think pending how the discussion will go and, from this, it can also go on next week's, agenda item too. I think, what they're, hoping for too is, they would like it from, approval or the opinions from this, because they have appreciation from this committee. They understand that there's expertise and thoughts here, because this is where essentially, they have essentially appointed expertise, here. So this is a chance for this committee to look at something and say, yes, there is thoughts, there is opinions, and it would look, it would have some nice, essentially it would have some validity if it did have approval, from this committee. Or if there is some chances to say, hey, there's some thoughts or some edits that possibly could come from here. This is your chance to suggest something, I guess. Yeah.
And
Or have some feedback.
I certainly appreciate that. I certainly
Yeah.
appreciate that,
They chose to bring it here. They didn't have to.
That-
So that was,
that we were, put into this, charter to come up with the materials management plan. I appreciate the input. And
yeah,
appreciate that we are, somewhat experts in this field and a wide variety of, businesses and, environmental interests and, all of this with the plan. As I stated in my email, I was a little concerned on the timetable of this.
yeah,
That we don't have adequate time to go through this, to really talk about this and really make a document that we can all support. And I think that's what our committee, well, at least for me, from my chair in this committee, I would like the time to be able to go through this, to support this document and to craft this document into an ordinance that the county, can be proud of. And I do know that it is definitely a board level action to create an ordinance. But as it was stated previously, the Solid Waste Planning Committee was put together years ago for the sole intent of looking at this ordinance. And we put a lot of work into that ordinance and, it dropped off for whatever reason. But we don't have that opportunity now to give as much input and thoughtful discussion to have this to just go before the board next month. So that's where my concern is that it feels like this committee is asking to put a rubber stamp on something that's already in front of us without being able to have meaningful discussion, input, and crafting something that we can all be supportive of.
yeah.
Okay, can I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
Is there any deadline for having this on the next board meeting? Because I think that's a little bit of an assumption.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything that would require it to come up next month. So I think the agenda as is, I think is good because it can produce discussion. There doesn't have to be any specific outcome from A1 or A2 today. The
Yeah.
committee can decide that.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. First of all, the committee is designed for plan amendments. And the discussion we had prior years was whether or not we were gonna do a plan amendment to address some of these issues. The ordinance itself is a police power action that is designed to implement. Ottawa County has been really negligent for 30 years because Part 115 requires that our plan have a police power ordinance to enforce it. We currently have no enforcement mechanism in our plan. This document originally, my template here was for Clinton County in 1992, when they adopted their plan amendment. I modified it for Ionia County in mid-90s when it adopted an enforcement ordinance.
If we could just keep it about Ottawa County. and-
It is, but this, you have to understand that in neither of those instances did their planning commissions have anything to do with the implementing ordinance. So this needs to fulfill the responsibility of the county to have an enforcement mechanism. And we have an urgent financial need for our household hazardous waste program, and that's the urgency, Joe, is right now, we do not have an OSHA compliant household hazardous waste management station anywhere. And we need to come up with the funding that will finance some significant capital improvements to make that household hazardous waste, which I think everyone here agrees is a necessary component of our plan, safe for our employees. There's no wash station. There's no electricity to do that. So the funding necessity for that program is what's driving the materials handling fee that is part of this ordinance.
But what it sounds like to me is that it's been going like this for 30 years. There's capital improvements that are needed that'll take years to produce a result. I don't think there's any reason why we can't take an extra 30 days. I cannot imagine the board being so urgent. I've not heard a single thing about this at the board level. I've not heard anything from administration. I know the board will want the input from this committee. I have 28 questions. I'm sure that other people have questions. We should get into the questions.
Could we
Yeah,
approve the agenda first before
Yeah.
we move into
Yeah.
that, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, yep, I would say approve the agenda and you can always make this instead of an action item, a discussion item.
Right, because I don't think, like, as an action item, that doesn't preclude that we have to take action.
Right.
So I think the agenda is okay as is for discussion. So Joe, you.
That
made
answered
the-
my question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep, I'm in.
okay, is there support?
Support.
Okay, any further discussion on the agenda only? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
I,
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you. So now that the agenda is approved, we can move into item 6 and have discussion. So I think, I mean, Doug, you provided some background. Is there some additional
I don't think
background?
30 days is a problem. No one is suggesting that that's why we're here today. I don't think the board leadership wants to take this up for August
I wouldn't.
at the minimum.
Yeah.
So 30 days, Joe, I think is more, certainly that's should be built into the process.
If I could ask, so you state that what the urgent issue is, the financial need for the household hazardous waste collection. What is that dollar amount of what we're talking about is the urgent financial need? What's the gap?
We haven't had a true sense, we haven't had the ability or timing to be able to assess that because we recently had OSHA out there. The biggest thing, it would take a lot, I don't have the funds to even be able to assess that. Because it would be like the water connection, we don't have running water at any of our sites. And, and the fact that, so for example, I would even have to have a building structure assessment type look at, because my buildings, so the biggest thing is the eye wash. So they say that you have to have an, forgot the exact term, essentially you have to have an eye wash station that has to have a certain pressure and a certain temperature. I need to have a tempered eye wash station 75 feet from the corrosive room. Which, you go ahead.
So my question
Yeah.
would be, I can understand why the county needs one site that has the capabilities.
Mhm.
But does every site really need those capabilities? Do we
Yeah.
need to have every site be able to take hazardous waste?
So you asked that question, and that's a good one. So then the breakdown asks, and I kind of had this little bit of a talk before. And so it comes to this, and this is a common thing we talk about with HHW, is how far is a resident willing to go to bring HHW?
I guess I'm more
Mhm.
concerned about what's required than I am right now about
Yeah.
that, because I
Yep.
think we could go in circles and talk about what
Yeah.
people are willing to do, and it's really gonna change person by person.
Yep,
So how many sites are required? And let's look at
Yep.
the MMP process.
yep, so
right?
MMP, so there you go, exactly.
How many
So,
sites are required in the county
yep,
based on this county size
so.
for hazardous?
So technically for HHW, there's no sites required. So, and that's what it's what the county wants to do. So HHW is not a required thing. It's what the county wants to do. So it's what do you want as a county? Do you want to be seen as a county that has one or none? And so we are currently considered one of the counties. We are in the forefront of the counties with
Okay,
HHW.
and I
Yeah.
really do appreciate it. I know this is hard,
Yeah.
Kim, and I appreciate all
Yeah.
the work you put into it, and like the current state versus future state for me, that's
Mhm.
very useful.
Yep,
But when we start talking about needing running
Yep.
water and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Is it better to have that be in an existing building, like for the
Mhm.
hazardous waste, that already has running water, that has bathrooms, that has some of these things? I mean,
Mhm.
is there a way to think about
Mhm.
splitting the has waste from recycling collection? Because to
Yeah.
me, the requirements are really different,
Mhm.
and a lot of expense to go into a remote site to
Mhm.
try to put running water
Mhm.
is a totally different thing than a collection site.
Because it will change what that urgent financial need is.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
And for reference, Kent County has one full hazardous waste
For-
collection site
That's
for the
Mhm.
entire
for
county.
the entire county, which is.
yeah. Well, they actually they have other drop offs.
Yeah, recycling, electronics, but
Yeah.
HHW, their Safe Chem program is just. at
Yeah.
one location.
Yeah, they had other HHW drop offs too. And I think, and I'm not sure if they still do. I haven't talked to them about the other ones. They did, because they used to have other ones. I'm not sure if they consolidated into just one. But at the same time, the biggest question when it comes to HHW, and then I want to do some research on it too. The biggest question with all things, how far are you willing to go? So the more places you have to go, and this is one thing that I'm hoping to find out in general with data. And this is kind of like a goodwill kind of question even too, and with PADNOS, is how far is a resident willing to go? Someone that lives in a city is more willing to go less of a distance, so like 10, like, like a 10-minute jaunt versus someone that lives in a rural distance is more willing to go like a 30-minute drive. So, yeah,
Thank you.
mhm. Yeah,
Very
you would,
important
yeah,
discussions.
Yeah.
100%. So
But
is
yeah.
that all, that discussion, we're probably more than
Yeah.
30 days, it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Is that all tied into the user fees? Like, so I'm wondering how
yeah.
this conversation ties to the ordinance.
Yes, so essentially, it ties into our current sites. Essentially, in general, it just ties into our current sites in OSHA.
If
So
I
just to
look
maintain,
at this ordinance, there's nothing in there about fees, so.
that's,
Can't react to
that's
a lot of
exhibit
stuff in
A.
planning.
Yeah,
The ordinance, is there a red line version that shows changes from before? So I have this draft, but I don't know what's new. I have no idea.
We don't have an ordinance right now.
So this is all entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there are other, I guess there are other urgencies financially. We have legacy costs related to PFAS with the Southwest landfill. But it's not just the lack of funding, which the county is seriously underfunded. There are also concerns about flow control. There are concerns about building a fair percentage that will go to counties like Allegan and even Kent for the revenues that they need out of the waste stream that's coming into Ottawa County. So there's a regionalization for that. There is concern that Kent has its own export ordinance. And that would be interfering with the ordinance that the county's been looking at on the handlers as they come in to Ottawa County and deposit at the landfill. So I know Russ was concerned about the double dipping that might occur. This is a way, we're meeting with Kent County in July regarding their export ordinance and how that would fit in with the ordinance that is being considered here. Don't want to see double collection. We tried to be equitable in looking at an 80-20 split. Because counties like Allegan that don't have a landfill are gonna have materials management activities that need to be financed beyond their general fund. And this is an effort to try to, for the first time, share regionally some of that revenue flow. And we think 20-80 is the right split because Ottawa ultimately is accepting responsibility for the permanent disposal of this waste in our community. We have no idea. PFAS is a great example of where the legacy costs of having waste deposited in your county they have long-term costs that are unexpected.
I have a question on that. It was later in my questions, but put simply, why would Ottawa do 80-20? Why wouldn't we just do 100-0? Why would we give away any money? I don't understand that.
Well, because there is some,
It sounded like it was just so we could pay for other counties' costs. No offense to any other counties.
yeah, go ahead.
So I struggled with that too, I think initially, and then I came around to, in my brain anyway, the way it makes sense is ultimately, like, being put on the haulers, it goes back to people that are creating the waste, right? And we want them to have the opportunity to clean their waste stream before they deposit it in our landfills. So if they don't have funding to create sites similar to what Kim has in their counties, then what they're sending to Ottawa will be full of things like PFAS. Right? So getting them 20% back lets them invest in cleaning the waste.
Although we would have no control whatsoever with that money. Like, I don't know why we'd give up a single cent to other counties when we have no control over it, no oversight.
No,
That's their responsibility.
it's a fee revenue, so it has to be spent on materials management. It has to be spent on recycling, household hazardous waste and other programs. That would be an obligation in Michigan law, and we're certain that these counties understand. But to Spence's point, we had an instance in Ottawa County where dad was apparently a chemistry teacher, right?
Oh, yeah.
And dies. Children are cleaning up the garage, find a jar of mercury. Right? If we didn't have a viable household hazardous waste program, where do you think that mercury is going?
Goodwill.
Because it costs.
Yeah.
You get that. I mean, it costs thousands of dollars for us, 13,000 or something like that. For us to dispose of, to keep that out of the waste stream. And keep it out of being packaged and thrown in with their general refuse and end up in either Republic's facility or Waste Management's facility. is something that we need to endorse and at some level help these other counties fund it. Because otherwise, they're gonna have to use their general fund, and their general fund taxpayers and pressures on that are going to lead to,
That's their responsibility. Right? That's the county's responsibility. That's not ours.
And that's also the whole responsibility of this committee and other committees
Yeah.
like this is materials management planning.
Yeah.
And that's why these two things go together. You
Mhm.
make a plan, craft it for your county, and you have an ordinance with it. I completely disagree that this is just a board level decision and that's done, just because the plan and the ordinance work together. Do you know how many times in this ordinance it talks about the plan and the planning process? Probably
Yeah.
100
it's
times.
the enforcement mechanism.
Right,
Yeah.
and that should work together and should be crafted together
Yeah.
with this committee.
Yeah.
And not just thrown
Yeah.
overboard and said,
Well, this is,
do this.
this
ordinance."
is, and I'm not sure if Doug said this yet, this is a living document. Just because this is going now, the idea is that this will probably be amended. And the idea is some of the stuff that's in this right now, for example, like the haulers part of it, is that the idea of the haulers part of this is a preamble for what's gonna be coming with the plan, like, why do we need to talk about data on haulers now?
Mhm.
The plan's not done yet,
That's
you know,
kind of my
so,
point, is that
yeah,
should
it is,
Together.
it is.
If you
But at the
create
same
an
time,
ordinance,
yeah.
now you're almost working around it as
Yeah.
well and within the confines. Now our
Yeah.
plan has to.
I'm
Yeah.
struggling with that
Yeah.
process as well.
Yeah.
This is the,
Mhm.
it's the foundation. So a lot of, we
Yeah.
talk about fees, right? We talk
Yeah.
about having resources available to do what
Mhm.
we need.
Yeah,
Our committee was planning to understand the things that we needed to do.
yeah,
This ordinance, to me, the way I'm learning about it is, it's going to establish what our fees will be to give us an understanding of the resources.
mhm,
So, to the point you're making, I'm struggling with that whole process, because this ordinance, it did
Yeah.
just get sprung up on us, and it seems really important for
Mhm.
everything that we're charged with
Yeah.
doing.
but if there's no funding for the existing program. And I understand what Carrie was saying too, well, then maybe you need to, let's say, pull back the existing program. But do you wanna go backwards or do you wanna go forward? You know, so exactly, do you wanna, so let's say, do you want to start reducing programs? And say have just one HHW program and then have just recycling drop-offs with no staffing and. Cause how do you get contamination is have no staffing for them and do you wanna have? When actually, from my understanding, people are trying to have more, let's say, they call, I forgot what state calls them one thing, and some people call them mega drop-offs, or. Do you wanna go backwards and?
So is that how we go forward? Do we have to take a couple steps back?
Yeah.
Do we get more time to think through this?
Yeah, well,
We have
so,
to do
yeah,
it More than 30 days.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
gonna need 300
yeah.
days.
well, so if you wanna take step backwards, then we would have to, at this point. Essentially have no funding for the sites, cause I don't have enough funding within the next couple. Right now, I don't have enough funding for the next couple of years. Because of what. Because of the stop process that we had. Because that we had started to do. Was to create funding. Then we stopped it. And so now I don't have enough funding for the next couple of years without general fund.
What's the shortfall?
The shortfall,
Yeah,
no
About
funding.
$1 million.
a million, and for 1 year or for 2 years?
We
What-
have,
what's
we
the
we
million
have
vote?
about 400,000, 500,000 needs for the Southwest.
Well, hasn't that been covered for a year, for like 20 years? Why can't we just maintain the status quo?
There are a bunch of capital costs that need to be carried, will have to come out of the general fund.
Couldn't we just defer the capital costs for 2 years or a year?
Yeah.
Now,
It's like carbon.
our pumps are failing.
They haven't failed
Yeah.
yet.
Well, they have, they're not producing enough water to justify even cleaning that's occurring, so. We're under an administrative consent order, we have to incur those costs in the next year.
Well, that,
Plus we have, realistically speaking, there's, I think we've estimated even for one site, we're looking at $250,000 at a minimum for updating drinking water and getting the facility
Yeah,
in position so that we can meet the OSHA requirements.
what is being paid into the county now for fees? Are there fees being paid by haulers?
Landfill.
landfills pay for my program 100%,
Okay, so do we know how much that is?
roughly $500,000 to 700.
So we have kind of sort of an unplanned need. Maybe it was known, but not necessarily planned for. That needs to be addressed. Right? It sounds like that is a pretty significant separate issue from working through a well-developed plan. So I mean, I'd love to go through I would love to rapid fire some questions, see if some of mine we could get through, if anybody else wants to. But I definitely don't think we should just quick pass an ordinance to try to pull $2 million from our local business to cover accounting. That was gonna be,
Can I just ask real quick, are we responsible for the declaration of funding this project? And if not, which I think we're just here to kind of help guide the board.
Yeah, it was just to see,
Why doesn't the kind of board just do it?
the kind of.
What, you need our
They can't-
assistance?
No, no.
We don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you guys have setbacks, go do it, and then you guys kind of bear the brunt for maybe not having this taken care of
That's,
previously.
that seems like that's what'll happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the
I mean,
county,
that's
county
kind
does.
of on the commissioners and the people who run the city, so from my perspective, I'm from Kent County, I'm here to help out, but looks like you're throwing kind of your problems onto this board, and we have to approve it to kind of clear your name a little bit, from this perspective.
Kent County has its own expertise. That's partly what's driving this.
I don't
They
see
passed
that.
an ordinance, yeah, they passed an ordinance very similar to that, because there's elements of theirs. And they are now collecting the fee that's coming into Ottawa County for permanent deposits.
But that hasn't impacted anything going on. I mean, that hasn't cut any revenue coming into the county or impacted any of the flow of volume into the county for material going to WM or Republic Services. To date.
One quick question too, how does this ordinance pay for that? Is it just in tickets and fees for non-compliance? And are we gonna, is it reasonable to expect we get $500,000, $1 million a year on people violating this rule? Like, to me, it seems like.
And, you know, how diligent are they gonna be to go find these fees too, which makes things difficult.
Now,
With providing a service.
section 200.7.
In the definitions.
Now it's on page 12. 2:7.
Oh, seven, that's that, okay, yep.
Structures a user fee that the Board of Commissioners is obligated to set. Fees can't be set by a plan. These have to be set by the legislative body of the commission, just like all of the public health fees that are imposed in the county are set by the county commission, looking at costs and balancing costs and expected revenues. That should be occurring at least every other year. It's never occurred in Ottawa County. That's an urgent fix.
So balancing costs the next
Absolutely. So,
revenues.
the ordinance itself will not do that. But the board will have to separately, like, it sets any kind of fee. We have similar structure with restaurant inspections, things like that. The ordinance authorizes the fees, the board of commissioners will set it. And it will have to balance its revenues against the costs.
And that's what it hasn't been doing.
It hasn't been, it's never done that. So even now, that's a deficiency with the landfill. surcharge over the years. It's never been balanced. Now,
So you're getting revenue from the landfills, but it's never been balanced. But now this ordinance, you'll get more revenues and then we'll be able to balance. Is that what I'm?
well, it establishes a process where the board has to be. We don't have that process in place.
And then it would be have to minimum service level, because we're just trying to balance. So when this committee comes in, you think about it, all these other things that could be done to follow materials management protocols. We're gonna have to go back to board and say, you gotta raise your fees, we need more money. That's not gonna go over.
That's the process, Paul. That's.
I did it. I'm trying to wrap, yes, wrap our
And
head
that
around
is
it.
the appropriate process because it should be done by legislation, by the elected commissioners. That's one of their core responsibilities, is to entertain those things and do.
I'd like to withdraw one of my comments from earlier. There's no way this is 30 days. So just for the record, I want to
I
say.
heard Paul say 300 days. I felt that one.
I'd love to just jump into some really generic questions and see if anybody has answers.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to read yours, but I heard you say that you had 28 of them.
Yeah, and some might be easy. I believe by 11, so.
Start with me.
Will the 43% reduction in disposal caps negatively impact landfills? We know.
It's an increase in capital.
Like, it's an increase.
Yeah.
Not a decrease.
It's an increase? I thought it was going from like 1.1 down to 800.
No, that's a joint.
That
Let's
was,
separate. That's another weakness in our current system, is these two are supposed to coordinate on how they split that gap. That gap has been exceeded in years because they don't coordinate their activities at all. So what we tried to do is increase the individual gap. We split it in half and have increased it so that hopefully we can better monitor whether it's being exceeded or not. And they can better monitor whether it's being exceeded or
I
not. because
think
they're-
to answer your
they're
question,
monitoring.
where I think it becomes an issue is in the years, if it's exceeded in one, typically we've looked at, okay, what's that 10-year run rate? Because you're gonna have some years where there's gonna be big volume increases.
Right.
Where I see the issue is in that the way it's written, I think it's 2x whatever your overage was. That's where I see that potential issue.
So that's my number 4. So my number 2 is what is the annual capacity used by landfills? Do we know? I mean, is it less?
Should
in
be,
general?
it should be less.
I think,
We looked at their
I
average.
think if I look at,
Yeah.
I looked at last year's, I think Matt was a little bit over I think you were like 780 and we were like
Yeah.
670. And it really depends on the years. There's been some years that I've been 800,
Yeah.
it really depends on really what's going on.
That too,
yeah,
the landfill capacity, I know that's one of your questions too, really varies.
Okay.
3 years ago, Audubon said 84 years of life on paper, but we
Yeah.
said Eagle. Just a couple contract changes and different projects, now we're down to 35.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
can lose one tomorrow, next year we could be at 72 again, so it's kind of all over the place.
So my number 3 is how is the 30-year capacity certified? Can you do like a 1 sentence on that?
I mean, you go, so
Sure.
basically, we measure our airspace and our compaction every year, so we fly it over. We take how many tons that came in, do a calculation on compaction, then that pumps up the number for how many years of life of that. Right? And again, that moves all over the place.
But what it doesn't take into account is potential future expansion, because
Right.
we're not gonna build cells or things now, but we may have plans of, okay, what do we do, whether we're gonna go vertical or, so it's,
Still more permitted airspace through Eagle.
Okay.
Based on years off from, Tom's point, we could go for an expansion or something like that.
Okay.
Which we has been done.
Okay, all right, my number 4 then, is the cap exceedance penalty reasonable? Wouldn't it significantly hamper future operations if
Yes.
trends continue?
yes.
Like, to me, I would recommend removing that from the ordinance or significantly adjusting it, because if you have landfills that run high for 2 or 3 years, you're gonna that'd be like going down the toilet, right? You go high, you keep getting penalized because you have 3 high years in a row, you're screwed. I don't know how you would possibly deal with that.
Yeah.
Then you're just not, then,
And also under contracts with our customers too,
Right.
So,
So I don't know what the other mechanisms might be for punishing landfills for getting too much stuff, but there's gotta be something different.
Seems like you could, sorry, it seems like
Yeah.
you could say you're committed to the Ottawa County volume, any outside volume has to be cut coming into the county.
Yeah,
Well, but
you
you have
get tricks
contracts.
with that too, with that kind of language too, you get in trouble, you don't get in trouble, but you have to be careful with, out of state. Because of, you can't limit out of, it's not out of state or is it out of country?
no, it's safe,
It
but
is state, yeah, I know there's something like that, you have to be careful with language for law.
Well, maybe there's a way then to
Yeah.
have everybody's needs met, and again, this goes
Yeah.
back to having to possibly renegotiate contracts or look at that. But if there's a mechanism where, okay, at some point you've crossed the threshold or something. And the state's not coming down on you, but we have a more local issue. Maybe there's a way to tie a fee to overages of some sort. Generates revenue for the county, but also allows, landfills to still accept, perform on their contracts. We can't just cut off their ability to perform on their contracts. That's insane.
So, Joe, there's
Oh,
a,
it is both out
There
of
is a
state
ma-
and out of country.
Yeah.
Christina is the planning.
Thanks, Katrina.
Yeah, she knows all that. She's with the state.
there is a mechanism, Joe, in here that would allow the landfills to exceed the caps if there's a state or federal emergency, because sometimes you get
Yeah,
a tornado, touching down, there's extra waste that goes into the landfill, things of that nature.
That's good.
You can broaden that section if you want,
That's a great idea.
to include, an opportunity for the landfills to petition the board for an excess beyond just federal and state emergencies.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And that would enable, some dialogue as to whether or not exceeding the cap is gonna overburden the infrastructure. Because, I haven't seen, what the high winds did to, your landfills and the waste that gets snared in the nets. It had to be a challenge for you guys over the last few unprecedented days of high winds. But when you exceed these caps, you're ending up putting more pressure on roads and on odors and on the effect of the local community. So having the board have some flexibility on the caps, but also being able to dialogue with the landfills on their operational needs gives you that flexibility without making the caps useless. Right now, we've had no mechanism for enforcing caps or penalizing them. So we need a mechanism that enforces the caps, but that doesn't unduly regulate.
why do we need the caps?
That was another question I think.
Well, I can tell you, I can give you a story about Ionia County.
That story again. Sorry.
But you know what?
I heard that.
But you know about,
But I know Gary Pitch and this whole
yeah,
New York thing is not a thing.
it was a thing. It was a thing. New York was gonna buy
There it is.
his land. It's true.
All right, well, I have some more specific
And
questions.
they were gonna fill his landfill up in 2 years.
But best time for dialogue is now, so that's why we're doing this, right? So yes, we want back and forth and options in the future, but now is the best time to work these things out. Do we know how countywide hauler licensing changes will impact local municipalities? Are there current local municipalities that are doing licensing that won't be able to?
Coordinates with theirs.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
it defers to their regulation if they have.
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I did notice that in question, how does that work if, so within the municipality, I get a license for that, but then there's, let's say, Port Sheldon Township that doesn't have one, then I also have to get Ottawa County, so either way, I'm getting Ottawa counties, but whose license? I guess, am I enforced by both of them, because I have to get an Ottawa County to be in Port Sheldon, I have to get a, Park Township to be in Park Township.
There's a reason why there's not much written in this is because there, obviously, there's work that has to be done. The main reason why I want it is for the plan, is that I need the data so that I can have the recycling rates and all that stuff. So that's the main reason. So obviously their stuff is first, and part of my roadshow that we'll be doing. Once I get the staff that I just got approved for, which is what I was gonna update later on. Will be to go and talk to everyone and see how mine, if they have one, can work with theirs. And so part of that, like I said, is if this were to pass or how this would go, it would be how can this either assist with theirs or how, like, so let's say they have a data reporting element, and if it's all right, you know, if mine has data, if I need to give it to them, or if they already have one that has data, how can mine work with theirs? Theirs is obviously priority since they're, you know, the more local level. So it would be, we would work and coordinate with them. I always, my job is not to take over theirs. It's, if I need to assist them, I would help them. And I talked a little bit with Dan before, like not saying that this is, you know, but, you know, if he has a level, and it would be to work with them, not to take over or make this more complicated. They're,
It's the intent of the ordinance
Yeah.
that if Collins approved your trucks, give a stick,
yeah,
that the county will not.
yeah,
To approve your trucks. Yeah, there's no fee that we're imposing
yeah,
for the extra licensing.
And the fees on
Yeah.
licenses aren't really a concern. It's
yeah,
not about the fee. It's about who do I go to for licenses, if both of them.
Right.
all of
Yeah.
them.
If you have a Holland license, that would work anywhere.
theoretically, in my mind, for like a hauler, the only, maybe the extra work you'd have to be is just, there might be some extra reporting just because I need data. Essentially, that's the big thing with us, our county being so industry based is, which with the plan is already gonna have to happen, cause and hopefully maybe I can work with municipalities, so maybe if they have your reporting data, which I don't know if they do already, but if they do, maybe we can work on it so that I can provide them the data.
How will waste flow control impact local haulers? Will it impact their revenues?
Well, where are we at on, what do you mean by flow control?
I was like, that's the
Your mentions
definition.
throughout
of it.
throughout the document.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I think it's in reference to other counties flow
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
There's no
So
flow.
we don't have flow control.
Well, so then the flow control mechanisms or discussion or that's in the ordinance won't impact local haulers.
I think it's because it's in reference to other counties' flow controls and
Okay.
not this county's flow controls.
Okay.
Those counties can't, Kent County can't control the flow into our landfills.
Thank you. Okay, okay.
What do you, if I could just, what do you mean by that, Doug?
Well, to the extent that Kent can flow control to its incinerator and does.
Yeah,
Okay? Kent could even flow control to South Kent.
correct.
What Kent cannot do is say, if we're not controlling, the incinerator doesn't need it. And South Kent, we're not obligating you to only deposit in South Kent. What it can't say is, if South Kent wants to release then the hauler to somewhere else, it has to go to either your facility or Matt's facility.
Can Kent County in what you're writing or what you've written, can they contract out, let's say, from the incinerator? The overflow volume, can they contract out to any landfill that they want to that may be in Ottawa County or may not be in Ottawa County?
I don't think there's a legal basis for that, and I don't believe, and this would prohibit that from being enforced in our. So it would give Arrow Waste the impetus to say, we don't have to honor that contract. If we want to take it to public, we want to take it to waste management, we're gonna do it.
I'm a little confused on that part, because
Yeah.
when I read through 207.2, like, I didn't even understand what it was trying to do. So maybe there needs to be a little, maybe it's kind of fleshed out with the.
It's prohibiting the enforcement of any kind of flow control in Ottawa by Kent.
So
or
they
Allegan or
can,
anyone else.
so no other county can enforce any specific, the county can't enforce some sort of flow control. Businesses can do whatever they want, and they
This
have
gives,
contracts.
it gives the haulers some freedom to say, hence flow control ends at the border.
Right, right.
It does not extend to where they, if they move into Ottawa County. And I think that
But doesn't
Is-
Kent's ordinance, I mean, isn't that what their flow control says, is it's boundary by the Kent County line?
I don't know it better. If
Yeah,
it
that-
doesn't, then we don't have a problem, but it can't by contract circumvent that process.
Right.
Any more than anyone else.
I guess that's the part I would just need to understand better, and maybe now is not the time, but I'm just trying to figure out, because I know Kent County has volume that comes out of their North Kent transfer station, they have volume that comes out of their incinerator. That when the countywide flow control goes into place in 2026, it's directed to go to somewhere within Kent County. But then that volume could potentially go to somewhere in Ottawa County, it could go to Montcalm County, it could go to Ione County. I'm just wondering, you're saying that that volume
If,
coming out can or can't come to Ottawa County?
if, Kent County takes title, if you will, to the refuse.
Yeah.
Kent can do whatever it wants.
Okay.
Okay, but what it can't do is tell Arrow Waste that you're gonna go to Waste Management or you're gonna go to Republic.
Alright.
That's what this design is designed.
This is Matt McPherson with Kent County. I may be able to clarify some things. So yeah, Tom is correct. It does stop at the county borders. So it's just municipal solid waste that's generated in Kent County must first go to a Kent County facility. So yeah, it doesn't involve other counties or how haulers operate in other counties. It's only when they're operating inside of Kent County.
Okay, thanks, Matt. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure, because it was the whole stuff coming out of those sites that that is an opportunity for WM, it's an opportunity for public services, an opportunity for pitch, it just at different times at volume, and just need to know if that was, if you were saying that could not come to Ottawa County. That's the part I didn't understand.
So my next one, we already touched on, which
Thank you, Matt.
I tweaked a little bit. Why would we give 20% of fee revenue to other counties to subsidize their operations? My other part of that was if we do some sort of coordinated user fees, are they reciprocal? If it is an 80-20, does Kent give us 20?
I think that is the discussion we're gonna have with Kent.
Right. Thank you for, yeah, thank you for.
Exactly, it should be,
Would Allegan be given 20?
yes.
But they don't, I mean, other than my transfer station, what do they have in Allegan
Yeah.
County?
That's, so part of the thing is to create this uniformity, is that we're a team, like, cause that's part of material management plan is some of, the thing is their materials are coming here and our materials go there, like, cause like on a hauler's truck, it doesn't necessarily mean that all that truck is. And that's why from my talks with some of the MRFs, it's complicated to do some of this work, like these estimates so far, is because your routes aren't all 100%, especially like City of Holland. It's not, City of Holland isn't 100% Ottawa County. And then it's the same thing when you get to like the Spring Lake area or, Ottagon. And I mean, that's why the street's Ottagon and, you got Kennewa. I mean, you get these areas where it's all, so if and I was talking to some of the other areas and stuff, it's so hard. Materials management is very much a collaborative, and that's all the Eagle talks about is material management is collaborative. So if we don't start thinking collaborative, it's really hard to do a lot of this work. And so, yeah.
I agree with thinking collaborative.
Yeah.
But we also need to put Ottawa County first.
First, yeah. And that's why it's 80% us first. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then their materials are already coming to our facilities too.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
if you don't rebate some amount, Joe, what you're doing is incentivizing Allegan to do what Kent's done. We charge an export fee. And so then the haulers have to pay in the Allegan portion of, will have to pay an export fee to Allegan and come here and pay another fee to Ottawa. So as Kim has alluded to, this is an effort to try to strike a fair balance with those communities, and hopefully those communities will reciprocate. And Kent will look at this and say 20% is a fair thing for us to remit back to Ottawa for Ottawa waste that ends up at South Kent.
So you're talking with them in July, and then we hopefully could find out if there could be agreement that they won't do export fees.
They already are doing.
So they would need to rescind their export fees so that we could have some parity between counties. Okay. Moving on to my number 8 or 9 or something. Are criminal penalties necessary for enforcing these regulations? Should the county put someone in jail for violating the ordinance?
Well, it depends. If you have someone who's regularly disposing hazardous waste in a midnight dumper, you may want to have criminal penalties for that. That's a prosecutorial decision that the prosecutor would have to decide.
Could we please narrow the ordinance then to focus on specific reasons for a 90-day jail sentence? Because right now it's very broad. You violate one thing in this and they can send you to jail. Not saying anybody would ever do that.
Right. I was just gonna bring up the food restaurants that can
Right.
be in jail for the food code.
So why would, it sounds like it's not needed because it doesn't happen. So I think it would be best to either tailor it to something specific so we can have a really strong enforcement mechanism where there's a danger. And then consider raising the fees if the ordinance is violated and bringing more revenue for the county. Yeah, a report might be late, right? Or something might happen. We could actually probably bring in more revenue from some of those fees and then not risk people's liberty for getting violent.
Another thing to consider too is going kind of back to the household hazardous waste. Seems like if I'm gonna put somebody in jail for dumping a bottle of oil in the wrong spot, I should have a mechanism in place for that person to be able to properly manage that oil. And right now, going back to kind of what Kim was saying, you have one spot in the entire county where oil can be brought. Again, this is a hypothetical example, but to me, it seems like we would want to have a program in place that says, here's how you can manage that stuff. So that we're not throwing people in jail because they live 50 miles away from the nearest spot.
Yeah,
So if you have an enforcement mechanism, you would want to have a reciprocal opportunity for folks to be able to comply.
Yeah.
You know, you have both prosecutorial discretion. Some charges still.
Yeah.
And judicial discretion.
Yeah.
We're not putting people in jail and somebody to violate.
Yeah.
You know, I was prosecutor for 30 years. I never did.
And it's normal to draft ordinances, leave some discretion built in. But yeah, absolutely. But how many times in the last, this is my next question. How many times in the last 20 years has a landfill or a hauler or something been charged criminally or civilly in anything related to what we're talking about today? Like, what's the number?
We haven't had an ordinance,
We haven't had an ordinance.
so we never had the authority.
So then we're actually going in blind. We could actually be setting ourselves up for, oh, you've now violated this 4 times on accident. We're gonna refer this over to the prosecutor, and you know what? Gotta make an example of one person, you know, it's not 90 days, it's just 15. Right? Why have possible jailing here at all if it's not needed? So, no offense to our prosecutor.
Well, I mean, it does have a deterrent.
It does have a
Between
deterrent.
violations and 90 days is a maximum. It's not an automatic jail.
Oh, I know. I'm just sensitive to these issues after seeing how government has handled certain things. And the threats that have come from government, including Ottawa County. So I strongly recommend owning the enforcement for certain things to where it really need. Household hazardous waste. Try to hone in on that still is a great deterrent. Fees, great deterrent. There's no reason that even in some of our other ordinances, we don't need to have a potential 90-day jail sentence for people who violate something one time. How often are haulers pulled over for inspection? They're not right now?
No. I mean, well, it's DOT, you know, the state,
Go by a local.
counted for overweight potential, that would be it. So if they notice something, they could look at a vehicle. I can't remember.
Outside of those DOT and overweight.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, with this new process, how often does the health department need to pull over haulers?
Yeah, and who's pulling them over?
Right,
Is Kim driving around pulling them over? or-
I'm curious. Because that's written into the ordinance that there'll be inspections and that haulers will be checked, and I'm wondering how often that.
If we did something, it would be probably something similar to what we do with septic haulers. We just do like a one-time inspection, make sure essentially you don't have just trash oozing liquid out.
But
Yeah.
that part I think needs to be updated in the ordinance. Doug, because it's really broad right now. And it probably should be specific. So that it removes any unknown from our haulers. Anybody.
You pull the septic trailers over on the road, or you coordinate with them to see what's going on?
No,
How are you
essentially,
getting-
I think we leave it open, I guess, like police officers would be the ones. And that how it's worded.
And they have the ability to do that now. I mean, if one of
Yeah,
my trucks driving down
Yeah.
the road leaking.
yeah,
we can find-
essentially that's how they're worded. So
Yeah.
essentially, yeah,
Within environmental health, like for
Yeah.
bringing the food example back into that,
yeah,
that's done through policy typically.
yeah,
I mean,
Right.
I just throw that out there, but I
yeah,
didn't. Like our enforcement for restaurants is
Yeah.
done through policy.
yeah,
In the health department, not through like the regulation or the law.
Yeah.
The regulation specifies that health department shall adopt a policy. That
Yeah.
explains how enforcement happens or whatever.
yeah. I think some of our stuff falls under, I think,
So this could actually possibly be removed, that some of the part about pulling over haulers and inspecting them on the road.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I want
Yeah.
to clarify inspection,
Yeah.
because when I hear inspection, that's, hey, we're just gonna pull them over and inspect.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, yeah, we have guys pulled over because things are dripping,
That's
which
different.
makes sense. but
Yeah.
Are you talking about, hey, let's see if we can stick at the arrow today and pull them over, because even though their truck is fine.
I could be wrong. What I was picturing, and this is so
Yeah.
early that I don't. this is
Yeah, I don't know.
Formulated, but like
Yeah,
potentially having some of Kim's staff like
yeah,
at the landfill, like randomly do like a spot check on people entering. Do they have like our sticker or not on their truck? Is it leaking? Like
yeah,
keep them moving, like just doing that a few times throughout the year. spot check
Yeah.
random.
So I would update the ordinance then to kind of narrow into what you're
Right.
planning for.
yeah,
Because it's confusing at best right now.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the ability, obviously, to
yeah.
pull over somebody on.
No.
or,
You
Right,
definitely do under the ordinance as it's written. You definitely do. That's how it's written.
right.
So I
We
would
may have the
not
ability,
change
but
that.
we don't have the-
And so-
we don't have the desire.
Yeah.
Currently, you have the ability to do spot checks at, too. I don't.
No, we don't have.
But I'm not saying you're suggesting, but you're saying that could be a possibility. Is spot checks. And if you
Yeah.
fail that spot check, then fines.
But they already,
Just-
the compartments already have that ability. I don't know why.
Okay,
it would have to
well,
be in the- I don't want it to be in the ordinance. I mean, that's part of just motor carrier.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I asked, that
Mhm.
they had that, but I don't know if they did or not.
My next one is not something we can answer now. It's about projected revenue and expenditures. And since there's no fees, I'll just skip over that one. I did a quick, maybe an easy one. Why are haulers from Kalamazoo coming to Ottawa?
There's no there's technically you can get haulers from anywhere.
Are they incentivized to come from Kalamazoo? That's pretty far. It's like,
Everything's price driven.
Okay.
So if the landfills price it right, they'll come, well, 28 right now, because it's still under the current, you can get from, was it 28? I don't have the list of the import and export that you can accept from.
I mean, right now, certain counties have the ability to go, other counties, but I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, you're not too far. from
yeah, it was like,
Kalamazoo
it
County,
would be
so-
on Hill, probably.
A lot. Just like some of the people too in Kalamazoo, they have nowhere else to go to, so. like,
Yeah,
We could be the only outlet.
yeah,
It could be driven too on where your operation is. So if your operation is in Ottawa County, you travel to Kalamazoo to pick up a box or something, and then it makes sense to go to Ottawa.
Okay.
yeah.
To that point, from, for contracted to the folks who run the landfill, fees for the landfills and everything else. Correct, right? If I remember correctly, we're talking way back when, the first time I was on here. Those are very old contracts, if I remember correctly.
From the 90s.
And you're talking about leveling up and doing different things. What about renewing the contracts as a part of that right now to help with that perspective? I mean, if it's from the 90s, maybe it's time to, you know, make sure the fees and everything are so where they're supposed to be. Because I mean, for my contract with the city of Holland, I make sure I boil in 3% every, you know, it's just, it's a part of doing this. So maybe it's time to level up and only have 3-year you know, those type of things.
And look, the way years ago, that's kind of how the solid waste planning committee ended, is that they were going, the Ottawa County was gonna negotiate with the landfills and their user fee and see if there was another way of getting more fees from.
Well, and I was thinking beyond the users, I'm just thinking the entire contract. If it's from the 90s, obviously there's things that are out of date. Especially with the law with PFAS and everything else that everybody else is talking about here. There's contracts that already exist, maybe that's where the first place we should start.
And the way the current post agreement that I think Doug thinks it's no good anymore, but it's 2% of our revenue that goes to the county. So as our revenue is generated, 2% of that goes to the county.
It's pretty fair. It fluctuates with time.
Right.
Yeah.
And not saying we're not open to looking at it, but.
I would have to look at it. I mean, I'm just making a suggestion to look at the finances of where they were in the 90s. Do they match up with today? You know, 2% back then versus 2% now, when we talk. I mean, I don't know. I don't see the numbers. It's just, I think that might be an area to start with that can solve part of Kim's problem and maybe some of the things that we're talking about.
Well, I'll stop for now. I have a couple dozen more, but it's a big document. So.
Can Joe email those questions? I know there might be some
Thank you.
issues about.
I think it came out last night.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I did see that. He did that last night.
You know, I'm wondering too, because if they're looking for a recommendation or a support for this from the MM,
And who is the they, by the way?
the Board of Commissioners, correct?
But Joe, you said that hasn't even come up?
It was
Not that I've heard.
admin sent this first.
And they probably just need feedback. I mean, if
Yeah,
it's not ready, it's not ready. We need more time, we need more time.
Well, and that was kind of be one of my points was, what if our recommendation is that we truly recommend that an ordinance is developed based on the actual plan that's done, so that's our number one recommendation.
Mhm.
That said, we also understand there's a financial obligation going on here, so then if they were inclined to move forward anyways, here's our recommendations for changes for a temporary thing, and maybe even put in a shall that once the MMPC puts out a plan, they will revisit that ordinance, because what I get nervous about is if an ordinance is pushed ahead, it's locked in, and it's very hard to change those things typically, at least at the state level. I don't know about county level. I would want something in there that says, all right, now this plan has come out, we have to revisit this ordinance based on this plan.
I like the first part.
Yeah, I agree. The ordinance in my mind should support the plan. Yeah, what are we saying we're trying to accomplish, and then the ordinance helps make sure we get there. The financial part to me is a different thing, and you know, what's the immediate need? Is that this group's input, or is that more of a general fund type of thing, you know? I think trying to marry the two together is where it's creating the heartache or the issues.
There's no way to like quickly ram this through the next 30 days to get it in before budget season. There's no way to do it. Okay, so we should send that message from the
Yeah.
committee back to the county and say, hey, you know, we'll keep working on our priorities here. We'll help develop the MMP. We'll really put work into the plan and the ordinance. We'll coordinate with, you know, all the locals. But we can't solve $1 million shortfall. That's not.
Yeah.
That is just literally asking us to go extract $1 million a year from local businesses. And that's not reasonable to ask this committee to do.
And residents.
And residents. It's just not reasonable at this point. We don't have the information. I mean, I would.
This sits on the current plan. Okay, this takes the plan and enforces it. And we're obligated under Part 115 to have an enforcement mechanism. So there's nothing here that is inconsistent with our current plan. And we're merely trying to get an enforcement mechanism that every other county in our area has for its plan, its current plan. It is easy to amend these. You just have to go before the board and the board can change it immediately. There isn't even a charter provision for a first reading or anything like that.
So I don't think you're listening to what's being.
No, when you have your plan, the materials management plan that will eventually come, this will have to be amended. Because it will have to sit on top of that.
That's why I don't understand why we're doing this now and not with the
25 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Sure, but right, it could have been 25 years ago. It could be done in a few months. It's that we can't solve that 25-year problem today. We need to work towards it.
And even on page 4, duties of the MMPC, the first one is oversee the implementation of the plan in this ordinance.
Right.
Again, that seems like this body should be working hand in hand with both of them, the plan and the ordinance. And I think trying to ram this through just so we have an enforcement mechanism in place without even our plan in place, I think is ill-advised.
We do.
So I have a suggestion. So just so I have an understanding too. So, because I'm hearing some voices and I'm not hearing others, because obviously there's those who talk stronger than others. And I would, for me to help, because we were asked all to do a suggestion, and obviously there's gonna be those in favor and those who are not. So I understand the strong points of the ordinance and the weak points. Could we all at some point say, okay, what are the strong parts and what are the weak parts on this? Because obviously I as a landfill would obviously oppose the parts about the landfill. If not, I would be very shocked. If I was Tom, I'd be like, oh yeah, I love the landfill part. No, I would be very and mad. Yeah, I'd be shocked. I went in knowing, and then you as a hauler, I wouldn't necessarily think you'd be against necessarily the reporting part, but maybe against maybe how much or like, or some parts you'd have feedback. I would expect feedback.
Yep.
And I'd appreciate the feedback. That's what I want from this. And I'd expect the landfill part to have feedback. And that's what I'm hoping for. And just saying, and right now, what, saying that I don't like this and stuff, or something like that, that's not really helpful. If I could get feedback, like that would be helpful. But some of the people that aren't speaking up as much would be helpful. I mean, obviously I did not write this. I am not a, ordinance writer, but at the same time, I think it would be more beneficial if you had a little bit more, and I appreciate like the questions, and I haven't had a chance to look through them all. And it's helpful to get the idea of like what you don't understand since you weren't, part of the full, process last time. Because a lot of like the roots on this are from what we did last time. But,
Can you send that out to us? 'Cause
yeah,
I wasn't a part of that either, so there was.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard because that was actually part of the plan versus this is an ordinance. So, but yeah, I will find the root of those and send those out. And they are all part, if you guys go to our page, the MMP page, and like, you can go through all those minutes and stuff and kind of review that, but I will find those and I can send those out to everyone so people can review it too. But the roots are all there, like the cap was all those, and we did have it set a lot higher. But I can say one of the reasons why we did bring it down was concerns of, hey, we did 1 million, had the cap at 1 million. And we start, we're already at 30, we're around the 30 limit, man, if we start having 1 million cap, we're gonna start hitting those, less. And we don't know to be honest, I don't know what your guys' dream expansions are. We're not looking at so we don't know what the capability of your future expansions are. I'm not your business. I don't know what it hurts, feedback. I'm like, hey, maybe a cap of this, or hey, like those are kind of good feedbacks to get from you guys,
Yeah.
to be,
I think.
as soon as your business.
Almost would be great, but it's not.
Yeah,
The way that this was kind of rolled out to us, for one, we didn't have a lot of time. to get
Yeah.
feedback, But two.
yeah, that I
the other
understand
time
too.
was Our feedback, it matters, in
Yeah.
my opinion, because the commissioner's gonna vote on it anyway, so basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did take that, I mean, I understand where you're
Yeah.
coming from, but it was like,
Yeah.
the message was,
Yeah.
it does make a difference, because you guys.
yeah,
the
we're
guy-
gonna go forward anyways. I get that too. At the same time, it's like, hey, maybe the feedback
But-
is, can we leave that part out for now and maybe we'll put it in later? If it's your feedback for now, whether they take it or leave it. I mean, it's your voice.
I have an idea for feedback.
Mhm.
I mean, is it Dan?
I'm there.
Yeah, that's Dan. Yeah,
Sorry.
there's a couple,
What was your
yeah.
name?
Nick.
Nick, and then there's
Sorry.
Dan over there too. So there's a bunch of Dans and Nicks.
Dan. Matt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Tom,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. You're learning all of them.
Nick, I like Nick's,
Mhm.
that first part of the recommendation.
Mhm.
I couldn't reword it, but one opportunity this committee does have to help use our voice and just preserve the process is to vote on what you had said. And I will say from a board level, Kim has a really good relationship with the board.
Mhm.
And I don't think that there's any reason to try to rush this into the next board meeting or anything.
Yeah,
There's lots of good stuff that we could continue meeting on and talking about, a lot of good questions. So, I mean, I can't remember what you said, but I think
Yeah.
the committee
yeah,
considered a motion, like you had said, I think then we could use our voice together to say, this is kind of where we're at, and we really want to work on this.
mhm,
Yeah, essentially
Yeah.
what I had said was recommendation of a ordinance to be enacted based on the broader MMPC plan that comes out.
yeah,
To which he had mentioned that there already is a plan, which I've never seen the initial plan. So it's very hard to.
That's the solid waste.
yeah. Solid waste plan.
So that's different than the MMPC, which
Very
is
different.
much more integrated with how to manage those.
It's
different
completely,
It's completely different. Yeah,
So to me-
Right, so, I mean, like, we're currently acting under a solid waste. That's the current state.
Yeah.
Just 2 years.
yeah, yeah. Which is,
So-
yeah, they
Joe
currently have.
Moss, who is OI, super conservative guy.
Hey.
We lost a lot of our.
Heather.
Hey, Heather.
Oh, oh.
I'm the one who speaks the truth, uses
Yeah.
common sense. People will ask why. So, I'll make a motion then that
Yeah,
we continue discussion on these issues
I think they just said Heather, I don't know.
Someone please
Yeah.
mute.
now.
Yep. Yep.
Through the next,
yep.
think you
There
go
she goes.
through the
Yeah,
next couple
yeah.
meetings. Is that sufficient?
Do we add that we should inform the board that meeting time? Like, is there a letter that needs to be created or some type of
No.
proposal?
No.
No,
Kim can absolutely share
Okay.
yeah,
anything from the committee.
And I have, I guess, a legal question. Do we have to make a motion or can we just say, this is what we want to do? And not do
Yeah.
any kind of motion,
Well, I
just to continue having a
I think we
discussion?
had it as an action item.
Okay.
So I think you
In
would
that
first
sense,
have to
we-
move it from an action item to a discussion item.
So we don't have to.
You don't have to, like, you probably understand.
But
as a board
if
member.
you want, a vote, so people can use their voice, then we could try to craft a motion that then you can just communicate, say there was
Yeah.
robust discussion and there's really good questions and.
I just know we have to follow. And not think of the term right now. We have to follow open meet, yeah. So,
would show some.
I think so too.
yeah,
I don't know what the motion is, but I
Yeah.
just think that we need some time and.
And I think that's, because like, I'm not against, an enforcement mechanism, of course, we absolutely need that. For me, it's about what is the plan and then enforce based on that plan, right?
I agree with you. Yeah, I actually like a lot of the pieces that I
Yeah.
got in here. There's just parts that I think need to be, narrowed.
we can always defer it to the, for right now, we can always just defer it to the next meeting too. I mean. We have the next meeting even. So,
So would it make sense like a motion to remove this as an action item and to continue discussion at the next meeting? Would that be adequate? Or does it need to be more robust than that?
yeah. Cause we can always cut, not essentially cut and paste. I mean, we've had good discussion now. You've gotten discussions, everything's recorded too. We can continue items on. We can answer Joe's, because you responded all, right? Yep.
Yeah.
You responded all.
Yep.
So some of your items were on there. And those who did not speak up, or need more time to digest. And keep responding. I mean, you have a whole another month.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Good question.
please respond. I mean, in any way, like, again, even though you don't, even though it's a board item or you don't think it means anything, you don't know until you send it. I mean, honestly, that's my thoughts. I always try to speak up.
So WM sent in some questions. Do
Mhm.
those get responded publicly or
Oh.
how do we?
I don't think I did
feedback
do it
from some of those
Republicly, did I? I think I just sent them back to you, Matt.
Yeah.
I think I just sent it to Matt, actually. So if you want, I could respond at all. I mean, yeah, I guess, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't,
Yeah, all questions.
Yeah,
it's questions.
oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't even think about that.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, I'm still a little bit, it's probably because I'm a little slow, I get it.
Yeah,
But do we need the ordinance first, or do we need the plan first and then the ordinance enforcement?
theoretically, you can do it either way. My intent the entire time was to, so you guys understand, was to amend this once we have the ordinance. Cause some of the items I need ahead of time, like for example, haulers, I can't get data ahead of time. I can't set the current rate without knowing what haulers are currently doing.
Right.
So like I would.
But do we need an ordinance for you to be able to get that data? I mean, is that data
Yeah.
you want to share?
I'm not sure,
Some of
I'm
it
not sure
is
what
I
rate
mean,
we're talking, I'm not sure what rate we're talking about.
Plan. So this is a
Yeah.
part 115 plan ordinance.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So it enforces our current plan. So we have a plan now.
Okay.
We don't have an
Yeah.
enforcement mechanism, which we need.
yeah,
This would be a 115 plan enforcement mechanism.
yeah,
Okay, but
When you have your materials handling plan,
Amended most.
a year, 2 years, whatever,
yeah.
this would be replaced with a
Yeah.
second ordinance.
I don't have any,
With the
yeah,
idea of that we need the ordinance. That's,
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
almost sum it down to that, because we have a plan, the plan seems to be working. We don't have a waste
Yeah.
problem at the moment in the county, there's plenty of room in the
Yeah.
landfills, you guys have room to expand. Why do we need an ordinance when we haven't had one in 25 years? When we're so close to having a new plan that we'd have to rewrite the ordinance for? If there really is something you're not getting, I want to know that. But as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, what we've been doing has been working without the ordinance.
yeah. So right now I don't have, I don't have anything for one saying that Tom, Matt, or Waste for one has to report to me.
Okay, but
That's one
have you asked
part,
them
yeah.
when they've?
What-
Yeah, I
what-
have, well, they haven't yet. That's true, I haven't.
What specifically?
Yeah, well, I kind of asked Matt / Fred. And I got it's proprietary.
Or what?
Yeah.
I'm saying about-
Not necessarily you as a hauler, but some people, I've gotten some response from some people about proprietary data.
What
Yeah.
specifically are you looking for?
I'm asking for, when it comes to commercial data,
Like what?
like, I'm trying to find what businesses are getting for recycling. I asked, yeah.
That's available?
I started to ask them, starting to get some, what I'm gonna start doing is, my next step is to ask each of you guys, and then I gotta start hunting down MRFs, more recyclers. Have a meeting with you guys, so I can see how much recycling data I can get you from you guys.
So we report that all the state.
Yeah, but I wanna start like Ottawa County more specifically. And so I'm gonna start like trying to map it out. So make sure I can get, yeah, you guys report it, but like for recycling, and then I'll try to explain. That's why I wanna sit down and get clear, cause I started asking you and we started getting like, that's kind of tricky because you don't know what your trucks. You said you can kind of get it to me because some of your trucks take like Allegan, and we can talk about it after they're not,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just need to know like what.
That's how I responded to you too, is.
And then Fred, but I think Fred responded to me.
That's my point
Yeah,
though, is
yeah.
ordinance isn't gonna fix a lack of data being available.
It
right?
wasn't a
Like,
lack of data. It wasn't a lack of data. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah,
So it's,
yeah.
I'll give you a
No,
quick
yeah.
example. People will come to me and say, I wanna know how many appliances are
Yep.
recycled. Well, if people bring in appliances with bicycles and lawnmowers and whatever else they
Mhm.
have all in one truck, that's getting weighed in together, so I don't know how many refrigerators specific, well, refrigerators, that example, because if they had 3M. we know that.
Yeah.
But stoves, I don't know specifically how many washing machines or how many bicycles versus, because they burn it in a pile, right? So, or if I'm a waste hauler and I'm gonna drive the most efficient route I have and it goes over county lines, I don't know how much was from this county versus that county, or this city versus that city.
Mhm.
So an ordinance isn't gonna fix that, that data isn't available, it's not a lack of sharing.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it's, yeah. It's not a lack of sharing, and I understand that, and I think that's a good conversation. And that's, yeah, so, and that's a good question. Is the ordinance the right route?
In this committee, had to figure out. You need. Can we, I mean, if there's data needed that you need,
I think we're all wanna work with. you to
maybe
get to
it's a
that.
matter of, I'll give you, yeah, I'm already willing to give everything with the city. of
Yeah. Yeah, and the
We
thing
track a
is,
lot of that stuff.
yeah. And I don't know, and I think I can get most of the data I need. I really do think so. But when it starts, I think comes down, I don't know, like I said,
Could we focus on data for the next meeting? And between now and then, develop all the questions that are needed for
Gaps in
you.
yeah, so I guess what we can do in the next meeting is, I guess I'll send emails out to the key people, that I need to talk to. And we'll just,
Could we try to do some outside collaboration too, if it's a couple people, just to keep the process going?
yeah,
Or to talk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If Kim wants
yeah,
to come for me, I'm more than happy to.
I
yeah,
think we also need to hear the results of your meeting with Kent County, and if you need, and, I mean, I'm willing to help and support,
Oh,
I'm the chair of.
county stuff is
See?
super easy. I already got all my.
Well, I
government
mean, but you
data.
said you have this meeting coming up with Kent County, it seems like that's
Yeah.
gonna be pretty important because of the way their fees work. So if you need support for that, I'm happy.
What does it say?
to do it.
Christina says, part 115, all management facilities to report their origin type of quality collected. They should be enmeshed in haulers and facilities, and those facilities should be reporting to retract.
And that's true. Pretty sure
Yeah.
that already happens.
And every month we send you a report from the landfills for.
Yeah,
where-
it's not the landfills, it's more recycled materials,
Okay.
it's the MRFs. And then I want businesses, materials too. That's where the question gets down to, because I'm trying to get as much as accurate as possible. I know it's not as possible, but it's more. And then it's essentially, it's the recycling rate. How do I get a recycling rate? That's where the question gets down to. So it's the MRFs.
So a lot of then, the focus is trying to get some pretty specific granular data on the recycling side.
Yeah, because that's the biggest question the plan asks, is recycling rate.
So we don't really have
The
that.
landfill stuff is
Kind of
easy.
new. So that's kind of new information and even statewide, that might be kind of new information.
Yeah,
I I don't wanna put this on Paul or anything.
Yeah.
Like, can DSI like help?
So Paul's on my list, actually.
Build
Paul
a-
doesn't know it yet, but he's on my list. I bet it's ask him yet.
Yeah, we could do that investigative work, and the other question I have that runs with that is the consultant that we bring in to help. Part of their scope of work is data collection. How do they come into play in this conversation and pulling that stuff together?
My hope is to use them as needed. My hope is to keep as much of this internally as possible, to use our own staff and our own funding, and then as needed, to use them, because
I
I,
understand that.
yeah, because I rather use the county resources, yeah. I rather use county resources, because I know we have an epidemiology department, I have the staff that I hired.
Yep.
And hoping that their internal stuff, and I have, good amount of data and equipment, like our GIS team is amazing, and my hope is to also, with our funding, hopefully be able to, I budgeted to be able to hopefully get, hoping, pending RFP to get retrack, and to see if I can also then hopefully link it with the states. I don't know, it's a hope, and then be able to link all that done.
Data makes sense during our strategic planning session.
Yeah.
We kept coming back to that, like, we can't,
Yeah,
and you can't make.
which I have a booklet for everyone of what kind of came from that.
I wonder if DSI can, or if the project could get you kind of almost everything. I use that term loosely, but
Yeah.
could we get you everything you need in the short term without, so that you can keep the process going, but not have to wait to do an ordinance and everything else and develop the plan, which I think is a couple of years, but totally a couple of year process. How do we get that data up front?
Yeah, well, technically the plan needs to be written within a year.
Okay.
And then the rest of it is essentially the approval.
So we really need the data, is what it sounds
I
like.
will probably have the data fairly quickly, not fairly quickly. It's compiling it, so probably over the summer and into the fall.
The recycling data, like the new stuff.
Not the data part, the data part, so over the summer will be a lot of hit the ground running, so that's why I need the staff, that's why I am. So the funding part is so important because the staff, I'm working on trying to get those positions posted as soon as possible, but HR is really busy. And then, the new funding is also important because I need a couple extra more staff internally.
So there's 3 new that we approved this week,
Mhm.
and then you're probably gonna need a couple more.
It's like 1.5 new, one's reclassified, and it's unbenefited, it's 0.5.
Yeah.
1.5 new.
So those are those budgeted? Those are budgeted already, right?
The new ones,
Yeah, the changes we just did.
yes, they were already in the new budget.
So, so is there anything I can do to help push forward the HR? You want me to go knock on their door?
Yeah, HR more staff. They're just understaffed because people keep leaving, I think.
Okay.
But, yeah, they're working hard. Yeah, I've been talking with them. They're,
Okay.
yeah, the staff is there.
We're going to we need to assemble just a brain dump of all the data points that are needed. Wrap our head around that and just start from there. I think to gain some traction here. Let's just lay it out. What are all these metrics that you want?
Yeah,
That
if
list.
you guys know any good people that will work for me, just send them as soon as they're posted. Essentially, I just need my staff going, and then my plan is just to get there, and then I'm gonna be sending out some emails. I have a plan of action already. The next step I'm gonna have is I'll be sending you guys out things. I'm gonna be doing a roadshow next, 'cause I need to talk to all the municipalities, get them and the people's wants and needs, and then I'm going to be, cause I wanna make sure the municipalities are all on board, make sure what they want, what they need, and then I'm gonna be, like I said, I'm gonna be talking to Republic, Airways, WM, verify if there's any other haulers in the area, gather all the MRF data, hauler data. Work on getting retrack, but I have to wait till retrack for the budget.
I think a good next step.
Yeah.
We'll sit down with you.
And then
GIS.
Paul was on my list, yeah,
And like all the same.
yeah,
Yeah, you're doing all those.
yeah.
Awesome.
My brain is
Where else
full.
can we step
Yeah,
in?
and then,
Like that.
Yeah.
There, even before you have staff, like, let's just.
Yeah. yeah, I had a whole lot. And then, like I said, Paul, you were on my list.
Yeah.
That's why I thought you were on vacation and I was like, what?
We'll be around next one.
Yeah, I thought you were on vacation. I was like, that's ruining my list of, yeah. So I have I have a lot, but, and then this was on there. Cause I was hoping, yeah, I need the funding for, stuff,
We'll step back.
so. So Joe, if you wanna give me some funding, that would be,
Yeah.
that'd be nice. If you wanna,
Twist an arm somewhere.
yeah, so,
It would be way easier for me to try to fight for some funding.
yeah,
than To try to
yeah,
do some of the other stuff that
Yeah.
needs some time,
yeah,
like, I like doing that. so.
yeah, yeah,
Short
Yeah.
term, I'd like to just chat, and not related to funding, I'm concerned about staff, health and safety at the sites.
Yeah.
And what can we do short term, so that we don't have the liability of someone getting hurt.
Can we talk offline then?
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping up item 6. I don't know that we decided or settled on, are we making some kind of a motion today?
Maybe a motion to bring it to next week,
Motion to
next month.
remove this as an action item and continue discussing at the next meeting?
I'll motion to do that.
I'll support that.
Okay, any further discussion about that motion? All in favor, removing this as an action item and continuing discussion at the next meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay. Here. Okay, so then just looking at the time. Kim, do you have other updates? We've got on here grant updates and then the work session reports. I don't know how much we really want to get into that, but the time.
Yeah, I heard to print the agenda. Of all the things to forget. I'm like, normally I'm on par, but apparently. Yeah, just a grant update. I kind of talked about it. Got the funding for the grant that was passed yesterday, and then, yeah, so I got my 3 new staff. One was James. So he's been tech, now he's a specialist. So he will be helping, work on materials management process, so. And then,
Can the grant be used for facilities? Like you receive the grant and that's part of materials management planning, you have materials
Yeah.
management facilities.
yeah. So the idea was, my plan initially was to leave the little bit extra that I had. And initially when I wrote it, a little extra, I had it for facilities, so that I could maybe put a little bit towards that. But because I didn't know exactly what I was gonna do with it, I just said facilities updates. I couldn't do that. So then, they didn't have it explicitly said like to update shed or. So I couldn't do that. So I have $800 or I have a certain amount that I didn't use. So maybe at the end of the year, I could say, oh, I'm gonna fix this. I could amend possibly,
Could you amend it before the end of the year, like where there's needs based?
yeah,
Like
Probably
there's a
it
need.
wouldn't go too far, like even just like a single gate, replace it.
Yeah.
Sort of, we don't want to eat.
yes.
out of the gate,
that's what she has said.
That grant funding on buying
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That or, yeah. I thought the grant would be better used is to essentially help write the plan. And then I had $15,000 for education, since we had talked in this group about the importance of education and, do those items. because I remember we had a whole bunch of discussion on education.
So there are possibilities though of spending part of the grant on facilities.
Yeah,
But it needs to be either amended or asked for or changed in a way that can be used for it. So
yes,
there is some funding possibilities through the grant.
yeah, but I couldn't do it, I wouldn't be able to do it this year. Because
What
I
could
would
be
have had to
amended?
do it, I would have to. I'd have to essentially. I'd have to get rid of everything I just did, so I'd have to. Go back to the board, I'd have to go back to Eagle. And then do it,
So surprisingly, it's not a simple task.
yes, surprisingly, not at all. Not at all. It'd be nice if it was simple. But, and James would be probably very sad. He'd be demoted. So, yeah, it would be very like, hey, everyone, you're gonna vote. No, he's. So if you wanna tell James he just got demoted, then. Sure. Yeah, that would be, that's it, and then, I think that's the biggest updates I have was that, so. Yay, got the grant approved.
Congrats.
Yeah, that's been,
That was a big lift, so. good
yeah.
job.
So,
So then the work session report, do we want to just hold that off to the next meeting
yeah,
since we are running short of time?
yeah,
We do also have an opportunity for committee member updates. So does anybody have anything brief that they want to share quickly? No? Yeah, sure, John.
I'll say thanks to Kim, because this is not easy. It's not an easy process. So I'm just really glad that we get a chance to work through it. And I really liked hearing all the input today.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I appreciate the input, I mean, without it, doesn't go anywhere,
Not easy.
yeah.
Okay, anything else from committee members? That is agenda item 7, so then we are up to one more opportunity for public comment. Any public comment? Anybody online?
I'll say something. It's Christina.
Right. Yeah,
So, I just thought I'd thank you for inviting me to your meeting. Hopefully I'll be there in person sometime soon. I realize this is a fun and exciting time and lots of unknowns. And, the fact that you guys are having these discussions and actually thinking about the ordinance and what you want to move forward with, it made me happy because you're not just doing the exercise, you're actually doing the thought process, which is what planning is, right? It's about working together, figuring out what's best for the county, and it sounds like you guys are on the right track with that. And I just want to thank you for that. And we're always here. Our Eagle staff, Jeff Kirchmerich, is recycling specialist. I know he's been there before to some of the meetings. And just so you know, we are, thankful for your patience with all this craziness. And I just want to say I appreciate that. So thank you so much.
thank you for coming today.
Anybody else online? And I think we are at the end of the agenda and I lost it. Here we go. So our next meeting is July 23rd at 9 a.m. I cannot be at that meeting. I am triple booked that day, so it could be a fun day. So hopefully, Dan, you can chair that meeting.
1 a.m. Perfect. Big shoes to fill.
Okay, I guess if there is nothing else, then I think we can stand adjourned. Because we decided we don't need to vote for that.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Enjoy
Yeah. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Doug.
Motion.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sure.
And I'll send that to you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll send it to everyone. I think it's good.
Piece of confusion.
Yeah.
How are we putting together ordinance?
Mhm.
We have,
Yeah,
but the reality is there is something that's
yeah,
just, that's being left behind. It's a new thing that's coming.
yeah,
And if that new thing
Yeah.
is 5 years from now, then it's maybe, if that new thing
Yeah.
is a year from now, then
yeah,
it doesn't make as much sense to me. So
Yeah.
some of it is my own ignorance, right? Trying to,
it's really, and it's really complicated. mean-
so that's where, for me, I wasn't a part of the solid waste planning.
Yeah.
For this kind of, I did it.
Yeah. Okay.
But now coming in here,
Okay.
I can't, so I can write functions.
Yeah.
Go to a company that knows something that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Or what the plan currently is.
Yeah.
Reasonably, like my position, would be, we don't enact an ordinance until we have a solid plan in place that.
Yeah.
That helps us to achieve those specific goals that we have. So as I
Yeah.
looked at it, like, this just makes, I can't, this makes no sense. So my
Yeah.
recommendation would be wait, like I said, wait till the MNP is completed, then you bring it in.
Yeah.
With that MNP, and then they work hand in hand with each other.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to figure out, because here's our, trying to figure out where the actual committee minutes and stuff are. I can't remember how that they all have this set up. Because here's our website that I have set up for us. And then
Is there the single document?
there's a huge giant book.
It's like 50 pages.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's a, I wanna see if I can have it. I'll see if I can either have it so it's set on our website again.
It's like, I just.
Good stuff in there that you get that for 3 years, right?
Cause Eagle has it all on their site. I'll send you the link.
That'd be fine. Just a
Yeah.
link.
I was like, the link has it there, then they show there all that stuff. So I'll send you everything and then you can find
That would
it.
be just super
Yeah.
helpful, cause like, felt a little bit like
Yeah.
I didn't even learn until in the process, I think he meant.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
ordinance based on existing.
Materials management plan. Yeah, solid waste.
I
Yeah.
was flipping it, like,
Yeah.
on the other end, that, okay, so we put together an ordinance.
Yeah.
And Now that ordinance is gonna dictate the same materials management. plan.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
Yeah. So, and I told him, so what I did, so he was, Doug is so, and so I had to keep telling him, cause he was, he knows the solid waste law, the old part 115.
Sure.
Like there's no tomorrow. And so I had to tell him and some of it, so it's kind of like, so. The new ordinance is very much solid waste, but I had to tell him, like, you have to count that when, because the existing solid waste plan is still in place, but the new part 115 law is there. So it's, the old solid waste law is there.
This was exactly my point. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah,
enact an ordinance that should have been done 30 years ago.
yeah,
When there's a whole new system of law that we're actually building that.
Yeah.
To represent,
yeah.
we should have an ordinance that comes out in conjunction with
Yeah.
that plan, so.
And he forgets too, I'm not sure, we do have an existing ordinance, but it's typed. It's, that's how old it is, it's like typed on a typewriter and it has no teeth, it's like. It's like that, and it says that the landfills will report to me, and if you don't, you get like a $75 ticket, and it's double. I'm sure.
They could just write you a check right now for that, right?
Yeah, public waste management, are gonna be
Yeah.
like,
So here's some bubble gum and baseball cards to pay for that.
Yeah.
fine.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I just, yeah, I think having, being able to review that